But that whole thing is based on Isaiah and what Isaiah saw when he was taken to heaven. And you have Apostle Paul that's talking about in the body or out of the body, and that must have been an issue at the time, whether it was in the body or out of the body. I don't think it really mattered to Dave. Dave was so excited that he didn't know it had anything to do with the mirror. He just knew that God had said something to him. Jesus Christ had said something to him. So he was just thought it was the greatest, absolute, most wonderful thing that could ever happen to anybody in the entire world. And he ran out. He was so excited that he had to tell his mom, but when he asked his mom what the meaning of the tree was, she didn't know either. She didn't know, and Dave didn't know at the time. But he's got a lot better idea that it was Isaiah now than he ever did. Just because of the other events that took place in his life. And Dave goes on about his life. His outlook on life was he never wanted to be mad at everybody, and he didn't want to be disgusted with everybody. He didn't want any of that. He just wanted to be a person that looked at life like he wanted to look at it, and that was full of opportunities. And he got up around graduation time, and a couple things had changed within his family. His grandparents, which would have been his dad's mom and dad, had become born-again Christians. They had told him the story. They had invited his mother and Dave and his sister there to try to make amends for disowning them earlier, because they really didn't want to have much to do with Dave and his mom and his younger sister. But that day they even wanted to pray at the door. They were all dressed up like it was Sunday, and Dave didn't want to be embarrassed by it, so he pretty much refused. But they ended up inviting him in anyway. And they told the story of how they were both saved, that somebody had gone to his grandmother and was talking to her and had forgiven her for certain things, and how it freed her, and how she accepted Jesus Christ into her life, and how it changed. And you had to know him, because his grandfather was the type to sit in a t-shirt in front of the football game on TV, eating chips, throwing bags of chips and beer cans for the fun of it, while grandmother was doing something off to the side, but she really wasn't that much better anyway. And so that really didn't impress Dave too much, and that was very few and far between that those things ever took place. I think Dave remembers it one time. And then how his grandfather came about being saved was through his grandmother, because she didn't want to be married to somebody that wasn't a born-again Christian too. So they both wound up changing, and a pretty miraculous change too. It was very noticeable to Dave, a very miraculous thing that took place, and it really made Dave stop and think hey, there's something to this, I just don't know what it is. And when his mother got invited over, they ended up, telling her that they were sorry for disowning the family, and that she was forgiven for her part in it, which was just dumb luck, but she still felt guilty over it. And she changed in the same manner. So it went from grandparents to parents, and then to Dave. And Dave received that blessing, whatever blessing it was, got that blessing too. So that blessing was being passed around by somebody that received a real blessing from God. And whatever blessing that was, I don't know. It resembles the altar call, and Dave always calls the altar call choosing to learn from God, and God accepts you, because that's pretty much the attitude that people have when they do that. And then if they have something that's in the way, that they feel they can't stand before God and ask them for anything, that part of them that keeps them from doing that is removed too. So if it's drinking or smoking or whatever that case is, Dave has seen that happen. He did a lot of research in it. And then there was some other things that took place. They were smaller things, but I can leave them out. But the magic was there, and Dave was seeing stuff, and it helped to bring about everything that was coming up. After everybody, Dave's younger sister was not a very good human being. She often lied, tricked people. If she didn't like something, she'd cut it up or destroy it, and did a lot of things that were very selfish. So Dave didn't really care for her too much, because that's the way she was. And even his stepsister took that route too. So it was basically what the women were teaching each other there in that area that really make it hard on a lot of the guys that are really looking for honest relationships, and Dave's younger sister had tricked him into moving out, because she would say that his mom said something terrible, and Dave was just being Dave. Dave was going to work, Dave was going to see his girlfriend, then Dave was going home and sleeping, and he hardly ever saw his parents. He didn't really want to see his dad anyway, because talking to him meant getting yelled at, basically. His dad thought he was pretty stupid. So he ended up moving out and moving in with a friend. And it was okay at first, but they just kept adding rules and more rules and more rules, because his friend lived with his parents, and they thought that that's just the way they were. They just kept changing their mind about everything. It was in the handshake deal, and it was set in stone. Not with them guys. but he was good friends with her son, and he stayed there for a while and tried to make it, tried to go to school, tried to do things. But everybody kind of has their own mindset. Everybody had their own mindset. You know, if you're a doctor, you're going to want everybody else around you to be a doctor. But these are just regular folks that are going to work, and, you know, and so that's their mindset. They just can't wait. They have to force you to do something that's, you know. Well, while Dave was there, he had another experience where when he was trying to go to sleep, it was kind of a stormy night, and his friend always slept with the radio on, which made it really hard for Dave to sleep. Dave couldn't sleep with noise at the time. It wasn't like the white noise of a fan or anything like that. It was, you know, this music, and kept him awake. And somebody started talking to Dave, and Dave was like, "Who's that?" And the voice in the darkness said it was Benjamin Franklin. And Dave said, "I don't believe you," because he just got done watching a TV show about people that talk to dead people. You know, so you always, and the person that was on there was always had to talk about what they did about it. You know, so Dave was like following the same suit. And Dave should have known better. It would have been from another source, because TV never tells the truth. And Dave never felt that there was truth in much of anything. But he asked him to prove it, and then the radio went off the air, and so Dave was like, "Well, I don't think that proves it," but he shut the radio off and went to bed. The next morning when he got up, he went out to his car to go to work, and he jumped in the car and started it, and then a radio was playing really loud. And the radio announcer was saying, that they were sorry that the radio station had gone out the night before because the tower had been struck by lightning, which made Dave just sit there and go, "Wow." So after that, he never really listened to the radio much. He really tried to push himself away from it, and most of the media, because of that very thing right there. But it encouraged Dave, because he couldn't understand how that could have taken place. And Dave often thought, you know, the crazy part Dave kept wondering about, because he'd always been told if people have those kind of things happen to them, there's something wrong with them. But Dave never really liked dead people anyway, you know, because the media and everything always spikes up to prove, you know, in some kind of horror movie that specters are not very good beings and they're out to do you harm. And so Dave was always like a little skittish and afraid of it. He didn't really know what to think about it at the time. He's changed his mind since, but to a different view. But it wasn't long. The rules got really hectic there, and Dave wound up having to move. And he went and talked to his mom, and his mom denied any of what was said before. And he wound up moving back in, but it was on the opposite end of town. And that was right through the 19 to 21 period that he had those things take place. And the house that he had moved into, he thought for sure was haunted. And his sister wound up carving a cross into the bathroom light because the bathroom light kept turning on and off by itself. So one day he come home from work and went into the kitchen to make himself something to eat, and he noticed that the kitchen had blurred, like he had put on a really strong pair of glasses. And when he looked into the kitchen, it was raining inside the kitchen. And he just like stepped back and was looking, and then it stopped, and he was like, well, he was hungry enough where, you know, he was going to brave it. So he went into the kitchen, he was looking, and at where the rain was coming down on the counter, but all he could see was green dots of paint. And when he scratched the green dots of paint, they were already dry and old, and the color of the walls was already changed. So Dave was looking to see what color the walls were underneath, and it was that same kind of green paint. And because that's how Dave is. Dave has to look. You know, it's like in the movies where you have to open the door because you hear something squeaking, and the Jason with a big butcher block knife is standing on the other side. You know, and you're telling yourself how stupid, you know, you should just go the other way. Dave, he was hungry. He was gonna make himself a sandwich. So his mom, being really meticulous about how she kept the house, had to put paper towels down to make it so that you could eat standing there without making a mess, and then throw the paper towels away. And he got into making his sandwich, and the microwave stand door fell onto the floor, and he was already nerved and about that. I turned around and went and put the microwave stand door back in. He didn't know why it had broken off. But stuck it back in on an angle because he thought it had fallen forward onto the floor. So he stuck it back in there a little bit so it wouldn't just fall on the floor, and went back to make a sandwich. Well, he got to where his sandwich was, and the door fell back onto the floor, and, you know, Dave was pretty nerved about that time, thinking that something was in the room with him. And he turned around, decided that when he put the door in, he was going to put it in at a 45-degree angle, but the door was only about 3 or 4 inches off the floor tops. And if it had slid out, it would have the handle up because the door was really too big to flip over by itself. And so he went back to make a sandwich, and the door had hit the floor the third time, and the handle was underneath the door, which meant that something pushed the door out, because the door was just too wide. If it fell on the floor, there was no way it could have spun over. It is against the laws of physics. So Dave, knowing there was something in the room, had decided to say that he wasn't ready for that, and that it should leave him alone because he wasn't ready for it. Because Dave couldn't decide if it was a good entity or a bad one. But he knew it was there, and he knew it was playing with him. He just didn't know why it was playing with him. It was many years later, he was watching about the Green Castle ghost. And if you ever watch anything about the Green Castle ghosts, the ghosts fly by and touch the camera, and then they're in the windows. And if that's not a shutterbug, I don't know what is. If it's standing in the doors and windows. So that got Dave thinking about the interpretation, that maybe it was actually done for Dave to be able to interpret what was going on in the kitchen that day. So Dave gave it some thought that the guy was using cameras, and see Dave, even though the 7-year period hadn't gone yet, what was happening was that the entity that was in the room with him was doing the printing press. You have the ink that's falling off the ceiling. You have the door that's going up and down. It goes down, it gets put back up, it comes down, and you got the paper on the counter, and that's what's going on with that. But Dave couldn't interpret it yet because all the factors weren't in place for Dave to see the interpretation of it. If he would have probably been ready for it, he could have probably done more than that day. And then about the next year is when his future brother-in-law had made him an offer to move into an apartment together, and he had found an apartment and Dave, being naive kind of with people, accepted it and moved in. And Dave was having a hard time with work, and his brother-in-law was too, but they were managing. But one of his brother-in-law's qualities was he always liked to talk about the Bible. So they were always discussing about things in the Bible because his brother-in-law knew the stories about Dave, and Dave knew the stories about his brother-in-law. Well, his brother-in-law was a descendant of a very famous individual. And so famous, so infamous, that if the name were to be said to anybody, they would know who it was. And I mean anybody. It's not like, Dave, he still hears about people and he's like, who's that? But this very famous individual, and the character of his brother-in-law, Dave's brother-in-law, reflected that. He was very bold, he was very tall, he was very dark, he was all that, but he didn't have a lot of truth in him, but he was liked by a lot of people, and a lot of people, he was always gone because people demanded him. And but while they were together, they would talk about it. But it wasn't until his brother-in-law decided that he was going to do interpretation on the Bible for himself. that Dave got upset. Because it wasn't just about pondering anymore. It was he was setting in stone what it actually meant. And Dave wasn't agreeing to that, about that, the meanings, because they were kind of not realistic. So when Dave went into the back room to get ready for work, he jumped in the shower and was asking God what to do to help his friend out. Well, God had come in such a way where Dave had eyes went black and there was nobody home, except Dave didn't fall over dead, but for the most part Dave was dead. And then when God let go, the blood that was rushing back through Dave's head was making his head tingle. And that comes to remind me of some of the old pictures of Apostle Paul, where it looks like he's wearing a big sombrero because they got that painted over the top of his head. And that was an early depiction of a halo, I guess, but probably more accurately to real life. The new depiction of the halo is, round circle, and it probably just basically represents the same thing. And it's death and resurrection. Death and resurrection is the same as dying or being baptized under the water and out of the water for to be born again. So that's the born again experience. Learning from God. And the words came to him that said, gather as many people together as would agree with you, and bring them together into one place, and whoever has more will be right. And he had gotten out of the shower and went out into the living room and explained to his brother-in-law what God had told him, and he agreed to it. I'm not sure if he was supposed to agree to it, but he agreed to it, but he never did it. Years later, after everybody had all split up and everything, was way later in life, Dave had found his ex-brother-in-law that he was going to a gas station at a certain time at night, and had explained to his ex-brother-in-law that he had found that and wanted to show it to him, but he never came. And the second time he explained the same thing to him at the same gas station, and he never came. He was supposed to come over and visit, and Dave was going to explain it to him and show him, because he had actually found it and what it was. And the third time was the same deal at the gas station, and shortly after that he ran into a tree and died, and was very unlike his ex-brother-in-law, to ever have that happen to him, because he was one of those people that could jump a motorcycle and stand on it at the same time, and he was a daredevil of a sort. Dave never had those opportunities that growing up, so he wasn't like that. But his stepdad was like that, and his ex-brother-in-law was like that. Dave was kind of intrigued by that. And he had gotten up on another morning. Each one of these mornings where Dave's getting up is all the same kind of morning. It's early spring, right after the leaves all unfold. It's a very quiet morning. There's no wind. The temperatures are like 60, 70 degrees, 70 degrees. Very calm, cool. Nice morning. Every single one of these days are the exact same kind of morning. And Dave calls it when God's visiting day. So whenever there's a day like that, he just automatically considers that God's down here walking around visiting family and taking care of business. And Dave had gotten up the one morning and was sitting on the couch with his girlfriend and his future wife, and the same thing happened to him. And the voice said, "You're free to marry whoever you choose." And when Dave looked it up in the Bible, each time he looked it up, because he had old concordance that found everything. And he looked it up, and the verse continued saying, "Even him who is in heaven." And Dave was one of those that, well, if you're God, I suppose you don't have to include